edition of the Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. Before we get started with this week's show, first off, let me take this opportunity to welcome back the regular listeners, and if this is your first time listening to the show, I hope you enjoy this episode and decide to subscribe to the show. And today's guest, I've got Ivan Cosic. He's a sitting volleyball player from the Croatian national team. So thanks for coming on, Ivan.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. No problem.
So for the guys that don't know a lot about yourself, can you tell them how you got into fitness and more so how you got involved with sitting volleyball?
Well, so I was doing sports before I got into the accident in which I lost my leg. So I was a basketball player, and I was in the Cadet team, the Cadet National team, at the age of 15. And right after the preparations for the national team with the cadets, I got hit by a car and I lost my leg. So I didn't know what to do. And of course, I was at home doing the rehab. Not other rehab, it's like rehabilitation, learning how to walk and stuff. And so somebody heard, of course, from the guys who were in the national team and in the sitting volleyball club. They heard that I was young, tall, and doing sports, so they were interested in getting me to sitting volleyball. So they were like really boring and annoying and trying to get me to play sitting volleyball for the next 3 years. But I didn't want to because, I was a kid. I was 15 years old. I was in high school, and I wanted to finish high school. So as soon as I finished high school, I started going to the university, and I said, well, okay, let me try it. I missed sports. I have to do something. Try the Paralympic sports. So I went to one training session, and it was great. I saw that I had potential in it because I'm good at any kind of sports, to be modest. So it went really good, and I just said, okay, I'm going to go to the training sessions just because I don't have much to do with my time. But actually, I really like the sports, and it started to grow on me really fast. Okay.
And if you'd had the choice back then as a 15-year-old, would you be more, how would I say it, persuaded to have done wheelchair basketball if you had the opportunity to do it? Obviously, with the crossover between, obviously, you've got the shooting skills already. Would you have obviously jumped on board sooner if it would have been that Paralympic sport?
Well, they tried to get me to wheelchair basketball, but I didn't like the idea of being in a wheelchair because I didn't have to be in a wheelchair. As soon as I learned how to walk and, do it properly, do it normal, I went back to the basketball court and shoot some hoops with my friends, which is normal. And I didn't want to be in a wheelchair. And that's the one thing. That's one thing about the sport which is good. I don't want to be in a wheelchair because I'm not supposed to be in a wheelchair. So just sit on the floor, take your leg off, and it's much more liberating.
Okay.
At least for me.
And then that's probably the misconception people have of sitting volleyball. Obviously, you've got the likes of wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair tennis. Obviously, all are played in chairs.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's that misconception that sitting volleyball. Obviously, you've got that sitting element within its title is probably classed in that bracket. Is that something you see a lot with people that you discuss it about?
Yeah, but it's a common misunderstanding or a mistake by people because not a lot of people are informed as well about Paralympic sports as they are about normal sports, which was the same thing for me. I didn't know anything about Paralympic sports because I didn't care. I mean, it's a hard thing to say. I really didn't care because there's nothing about it in the media. It's not well covered, except when somebody wins a Paralympic medal or something like that. But you gotta understand that was what was it, 15 years ago? So, I mean, the awareness of Paralympic sports is much better now. And they have they have better media coverage and everything. So now easier to be uh, uh, more informed about Paralympic sports, and especially because of Facebook and all the social media and the way that we exchange information today, it's much more different than it was 15 years ago.
That's definitely something I agree with. And on that point of getting it out to obviously people out there, do you believe in Croatia that there's still some way to go to get Paralympic sport on level par with able-bodied sport?
No, unfortunately, no, because able-bodied sport has a lot more money in invested. It's a totally different level, and I think it's never going to be on the same level because, I mean, people are interested in regular sports because it's easier for them to play it. I mean, if you want to play sitting volleyball, you have to come, you have to know which clubs are here and come to the training session. I mean, it's free. I mean, everybody can come here and play, but it's not just interesting for people because they don't know about it. And I'm afraid it's not ever going to be on the same level as able-bodied sports. Okay. Certainly just because of the financial situation and the political situation as well. I mean, politics is everywhere, unfortunately, as well as in able-bodied sports, so it is in the Paralympic sport.
That's probably what's not great about sport, obviously, is all the stuff behind the scenes. What a lot of people don't see and the athletes have to deal with, probably not on a daily basis, but probably at least at a minimum once a year, is obviously something political, obviously, be it internally within the team, the politics that way, or higher up.
But I think it's happening in every country, not just. I think I'm not just speaking for Croatia. I think it's happening in every country, but people just don't want to say it.
It's one of those things. It's you try not to get too involved because obviously you say the wrong thing and it could have implications for your career down the line. So it's kind of towing, how would I say it, that fine line. Okay, you might agree with something a teammate says, or you've got a grievance about something, but you've got to look on the flip side. Well, if I say this or do that, what will the implications be on me down the line? Which is probably not right, but it's what it is. What it is. It's kind of a beast in itself.
I mean, I was working as a Secretary General for the Sitting Volleyball Federation for 2 years, and I know that I'm saying this because I know what kind of way politics is involved in sport, and I really don't like it. So it's much better to be just an athlete. But on the same side, nobody cares about it. Let's say the media don't care about it. But in 2011, when I got the invitation to go play for Great Britain, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I mean, why not? And it's an opportunity, I'm going to take it. Maybe to be at the London Paralympics. And so I went to Great Britain, and as soon as I did that, I was out in the newspaper like I was a traitor I was a traitor. They said I was like, don't want to play for my country, I want to play for somebody else because of some stuff. I don't have like enough, let's say, conditions. We don't have good enough conditions for training sessions and for games, which is true, but we try to make the best of it. That's our clubs, but the Paralympic Committee doesn't really pay much attention to it, but now they pay more attention than they did before when I decided to go play for Great Britain. So, they don't care, but suddenly they do care when you do something that's wrong. So it's, as you said, you have to watch out what you're doing. And
yes, I'd agree with that sentiment. They probably have done something because obviously the media took it upon you to have a go at you. Okay, we'll do something about this so they don't get the ramifications put on them down the line.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't you do
Yeah.
this to stop more players going and playing for another country?
Exactly, because in Paralympic sports, I think you have the same problem everywhere, that it's very difficult to include people with disabilities in sports, because if you're born with a disability, it's difficult to become a sports person. Like, it's difficult to get involved in sports, and if if you get the disability by accident, like I did, and you go into sports, and suddenly, like, you've never been into sports before, so you gotta become a sports person as well. And but it's a difficult thing, because suddenly you're disabled, your whole life changes, and you should become a sports person. So we have a lot of people coming in and leaving straight away, because sports is a different way of life than if you're not a sports person. And I was lucky, because I was in sports. I was involved in sports before the accident, and I just stayed in sports after the accident, which is much easier for me and for people around me, because of obvious reasons. You don't have to tell me a lot what I have to do, how I have to behave. You don't have to tell me to come to the training sessions because I want to. I know what good is going to be for me if I go there regularly, and I just kind of build myself into a better player. But that's really a big problem, because a lot of people come here and to try to do like sitting volleyball and training sessions, but they don't stay because it's difficult for them. They think it's an easy sport, but it's not. I mean, you can't say for any sport that it's easy.
It's well, when you say obviously coming into sport, it's definitely a mindset thing. Obviously, if you're, it's kind of an easy way of explaining it. It's like a small club, and I had somebody say to me just a week ago. Obviously, you've got your like groups within schools. Obviously, the smart ones, the nerds, the sporty ones, are the jocks. Obviously, you're put in that category if you're in that kind of that group to start with. It doesn't matter if you've obviously come over from able-bodied sport and have an accident and then come into Paralympic sport. You've already got that mindset of sport, that you got a drive, that you want to kind of have. You've got set goals where I want to achieve this to progress within that sport. Whereas, like you say, somebody coming in to a sport and they've not done anything, well, we'll say recreational at all in their lives, as a little bit of a kind of on a back foot to start with, because obviously they've got to kind of get that mindset. Obviously, some people can, others can't, should I say. So for them, it's probably, obviously with regards to your club, it's probably very performance oriented, because obviously it's one of the better ones in Croatia. So obviously you guys have got obviously a target. Obviously we're a performance club, whereas probably somebody starting off might want to see it more as, how would I put it, a hobby or something like that they want to do from time to time, whereas probably the higher end of your club is a little bit further on than that, and some people can't deal with probably the extra pressure of what that brings.
But no, you know what we did, which is a good thing. Luckily, we have enough players so we can make two clubs. So our club Zagreb, that's the club where, of course, we're the champions of Croatia for a long time now, because we work the hardest and we train the hardest and we put a lot of effort into our game, and we try to go to international tournaments to get some experience from other teams like Germany and Bosnia and stuff. And next to Zagreb we have Agram, which is our club as well, but it's for recreational players, so they can play the Croatian League, they can play the Croatian Cup, but they don't have any obligations about coming to the training sessions, or it's just like you come whenever you want, whenever you feel like it. They don't have a coach, so they decide who's going to play, and it's much more easygoing, but it's it's much more difficult to play there because there's no structure.
Mm.
So if you're good enough and if you want to try better, if you want to improve, then you go to Zagreb, but it's basically the same club because we have the training session on the same court.
Okay.
Yeah, but the training session varies. I mean, Zagreb, we're doing some systematic training sessions. Our coach decides what do we do, and they don't have to do it. They can just play or do whatever they want, So
Okay, well,
I think it's a good thing.
well, it brings two sides of the coin. Obviously, if you want to just mess about, you've got that club,
Yeah.
and obviously, if you've
Yeah.
got expectations of progressing within the sport, you've got the other side of it, and obviously,
Exactly.
you can kind of flip between one to the other,
Yeah.
depending on where you are in your career. And obviously, you talked about coming over to the UK, and that's where we kind of the past met. What did you think of obviously the league structure over here?
It's different than we have it here in Croatia. We have leagues. We have one league, and we have 14 clubs. So we play every other week. We have a cup system as well. It's quite different because it's a smaller country and it's easier to get one point than another than it is in the UK. And also we have a lot of players, much more players than you have in the UK. I mean, thanks to the war that was happening 20 years ago. So I don't know. I kind of prefer this way, the way we play in Croatia. I mean, the Grand Prix system is good, but it doesn't have the advantage of playing every other week. So when you play the league structure like we do have in Croatia, and you get more experience in more matches with every team. So you play with the really strong teams and you play with the really weak teams. So I don't know. I think it's better this way, but you can't organize your league structure on our way because it's different. Because of the number of the clubs and the ability of people going over. Because it also has to do with the financing of the clubs, the way the clubs find their money, and it's totally different than it is here. I mean, the Germans don't have the league structure as we do because they're a much bigger country, but they're really good. Their national team is excellent, but still, it all depends on the conditions that you have. I mean, I liked it there because we had the training sessions like 3 times a day, as I said, which was great for me because that was the national team. But club-wise, only 2 training sessions a week, and it's on the other side of London, and then you have to lose 2 hours to get there, do a training session, which was not that well organized because not a lot of people show up every time, and it's totally different every time you go there. So it's different.
And then something you probably alluded to, obviously, as you say, we had 3 sessions, myself included because I was training at the time, with the national team. Obviously, when it was broken down to when we went back to our clubs, it was generally, how would I put it in a nice way? Obviously, the makeup of the national team was probably about 2-3 clubs anyway. So the level of the games were probably about 2 matches a Grand Prix were kind of, trying to put it in a nice way.
Challenging.
No, but as in like when you're playing the easier teams, you generally drop down to that level. You didn't execute the things properly that you were supposed to, and obviously.
But still, we have the same problem here because our national team right now consists mostly of players from my club, from Zagreb, which is good because we can do our tactics at our training session as a club. We can do it for the national team. So it's really important that you guys play a lot together so you can know each other better, and that way you will function better as a team. But still, when we play the league, I mean, we are much stronger than the other club. So it's also challenging to play with a lower level club on a high level. It's really easy to relax and just like do some points. You know you're gonna win. You really know you're gonna win, and if they take a set off of you, that's a great success for them. But if we play 100%, nobody can take a set off of us, and that's what happened 2 3 years in a row. We didn't lose one set in the cup or in the league. But still, that's a part when you have to change your mindset and you have to be be on the top level all of the time. It doesn't matter who your opponent is. It matters how you play. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing.
Well, it's like you say, it's a mindset, but I'd probably be more inclined, and probably the case of probably the rest of the players, they held their hands up and be truthful. Obviously, most of the time, they don't do that. They go to the level, obviously, of the opposition, and it's easier because you don't have to execute things as well.
Yeah.
Because you're in your comfort zone. So if people are honest, they probably, well, a lot of people, sports people, they like to go to that comfort zone because obviously if I can execute a skill at say 60-70% of what I'm capable of, it doesn't take much effort to do that.
Yeah, I know, but it's all about what do you want to do if you want to develop yourself as a player. I mean, when you're playing against a weaker team, it's sometimes you can pass 2 or 3 rotations without touching the ball. And that's the biggest problem because then you get cold and you have to move all of the time and you have to be in the game, but you're not touching the ball, because it can't even get to you. That's how good you play against the other team. So that's the challenge, to keep it on that level and just move around and watch the game and try to be ready for when the ball comes to you. And, your touch lasts for less than a second and you have to do it right. So it can also happen on a high level in the European Championship or in the World Championship, against some teams. So, I mean, it's very important to maintain it. But the problem is, because it's a team sport, it has to be 6 people thinking that way, not just one. So if 2 people are thinking that way, but 4 are not, and the game level drops instantly. That's the biggest challenge.
Well, it's the same with any team sport. It's obviously you need everybody on the same page. Whereas that's probably what obviously it's easier for the individuals that compete, obviously, because they don't have to. The only person they have to worry about is themselves. If they drop, that's the only person they've got to get back up. Whereas if you rely on somebody else on that day to compete, they're off by 1%.
Yeah,
it can have a massive impact on the overall outcome. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems in this sport because it's much more difficult to get to a higher level because it's a team sport, of course, and that's why people find it so challenging and they quit easy. Because if you don't get into a good team straight away, like I did, there's a bigger chance that you're going to drop out from sitting volleyball and you're going to go into athletics or some individual sport. I mean, you know that you have people who just joined sitting volleyball and they start playing and they suddenly realize, I mean, it's not going to be that easy to get some kind of success, to get the Paralympic medal. So under false pretense, they quit the sport and they go to a much, much easier sport, the individual sport, where they can get a medal and suddenly they're heroes in their country. I don't like that because it shows that they're taking the easy way out. Mm-hmm. Sitting volleyball, wheelchair basketball, and all the other team sports are much more challenging than individual sport. And I can say that because I've tried athletics, I've tried other sports. After 5 months of throwing the discus and javelin and shot put, I got three silver medals in Croatia in the national championship, and I was fourth in all three categories in the junior world championships after 5 months of training. That shows you on how low level that sport is. And it's not challenging for me. It's much more challenging to play sitting volleyball against Bosnia, against Russia, against Ukraine and Germany and Netherlands, who are great teams in Europe. And it's so difficult, and you have so much to learn, and you have to try really hard to be better. And it all depends on your teammates as well, because you can be the best player ever, but if your team is not that good, you won't do anything. You won't win any medals, and that's the downside. That's the side that can get you to think, I want to quit this sport. I want to do something where I will be rewarded. That's the way a lot of people think.
Well, going on that point, then I've probably gone the hard route then, because I've gone the other way. I've gone from individual sport to team sports. I've gone the opposite way.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. You know, it's much more challenging and it's much more difficult.
Well, I kind of emphasize your point. Obviously, if people, like you said earlier in the show, about obviously people think sitting volleyball is easy. I had that mindset, if I'm honest. I was watching the games when I was competing out in Beijing. I thought, oh, this sport looks easy. But then when I actually tried it and fed back to the guys from rowing, when I've actually done it, I'm thinking, I may have knocked it at the time, but it's harder than it looks. And then obviously, as I've progressed, it's become easier. Obviously, now I've retired from the sport in general at the elite level.
But it also becomes much more fun.
I probably could still do volleyball, but not to the skill sets are not there.
Yeah.
But then that's, as like you probably attest to as well, that's when you get frustrated. Oh, I used to be able to do this, and I used to not. It used to be easy, so you get more frustrated with yourself.
I mean, you think it's easy, but when you sit on the court and on the other side you have Iran or Bosnia or Russia, and when they hit the ball at you, then you just want to go off court, because it's not easy. It's difficult, and it's far from easy. You know, that's what I like about the sport.
Oh no, I've always liked to play against the better teams, better opposition, because I like to test myself against.
No, I do that. I like that as well. But can you put yourself in a perspective of somebody who thinks it's an easy sport and tries to play the top level against top level teams?
Oh, yeah,
it can be very discouraging.
They're brought down to earth very, very quickly then.
Yeah.
Because obviously we've had, for like training sessions with GB, we've had able-bodied people who've been standing players come in and train, and obviously they've been playing it. What was it, for example? I think it was 10, sometimes 20 years, and obviously the skill set are there. But what they found challenging was obviously the moving around, and obviously that's probably an equalizer for any impairment. Obviously, the more limbs you have, the more difficult per se it is to get around. Because obviously, in theory, the double amputees are quote unquote the quickest ones to get on from one end of the court to the other. But they also have not you particularly, but obviously the single amps or say the bigger guys who like to bully them at the net.
It's not that I like it. I do like it. It's fun, but it's easier for us to play at the net.
Well, it's one thing.
Everything has its other side. I mean, if you're double amputee, and it's easier for you to move left to right. Of course it is, because you don't have legs to bother you. But for me, it's easier to move into back because I can push around with my leg. And of course you have more stability if you have your legs. If you have two legs or one leg, you have more stability than if you're a double leg. You know that when you're fighting on the net, I can just push you over with my hands. It's not bullying. It's using your strength, your body strength.
It's a sly tactic that probably every team uses to get an easy point. Oh, we'll put it here. And the term is, obviously, for the viewers and the listeners, obviously, it's a form of jousting. And obviously, as Ivan says, what would you say, 90% of the time you'd win that joust if the referee doesn't call it a let?
It depends on who I'm playing against.
Oh, no, I mean if it was a double amputee you were against.
Oh, yeah. But it also I don't know. It depends. It depends. I can't say. It's impossible to say because we have double amputees who are excellent players, and it's you got to know the other team and you got to know the other players, and you got to look who's on the other side of the net across you. And every rotation, it's different tactics on how you're going to hit the ball, how you're going to make the point, and you got to. Sometimes it's not enough to use raw force. You got to do something in an intelligent way, and that's the thing that you have to have. It's sports intelligence to improve your game, and you have to develop it. And it goes with time and experience, because when somebody makes you look like an idiot on the net, like the Bosnians did to me, they have their stuff they're playing for a lot of. And when I started playing, and they really make you look like an idiot when you fall for those tricks, which are not tricks. It's intelligent way of playing. So then you start to realize, okay, I have to do that as well. I have to improve on that. I can hit the ball hard, but he's much more intelligent than I am, and it's easier for him to score points against me than it is for me against him.
That's an interesting point. And then, obviously, you touched upon it earlier on in the podcast, obviously, with sitting volleyball in the Balkans area, got a lot of its players from, obviously, the war down there.
Yeah.
Has Bosnia become one of the leading nations within the sport because of that, you believe? Or is there a culture in that region that volleyball is a part of the culture anyway?
Have you ever seen a standing volleyball Bosnian team play on any tournament?
No.
No, because they're not good. They're not good enough to play on that high level. In Croatia, we had a lot of Russian coaches, like Russian players in standing volleyball, so we have much more volleyball tradition than Bosnia has. But the Bosnians did one thing good that Croatia didn't do. So there's a lot of people who got injured during the war, and so what they did is they tried to rehabilitate those people by putting them into sports, to get their social lives back again, to make them feel useful. And the people liked it, and they started playing it. And, I mean, they did a better job than we did. They paid much more attention to it. But they didn't have any money, so the people played it for fun. They played it they played it because they wanted to play it, and they wanted to improve. The good thing is about this, the Balkans, is genetics. Most of us are really tall, strong, and so that's our advantage. I mean, next to, if you look at Italy, I mean, it's genetics. You can see, how Montenegro, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, we are big people. So, I mean, that height has a lot to do with sitting volleyball. So that's the good thing that they put to use when they started playing the sports, and of course they evolved it in a really good way. I just took advantage of the fact that we had a lot of amputees and a lot of disabled people after the war, and they just put it to good use. So people are playing volleyball, and they reached the top level, and now they're just holding that top level, which is excellent. We never reached the top level because until 1998 we had 2 sitting volleyball clubs in Croatia. Bosnia has 2 or 3 leagues, if I'm not mistaken. They have 3 leagues, so that's a lot of clubs. It's a lot of people to choose from.
And then obviously you say they've got 2 or 3 leagues. Also, at least the top one is obviously they're one of the countries in the world that actually has professional league, whereas that's not the case in Iran, who's now gold medalists in Rio. They're the only 2 countries in the world.
Yeah, Iran and Bosnia. Iran has it. I mean, volleyball is the second national sport next to football, I think, in Iran. I had luck to play there in the Junior World Championship in Iran, and it's wonderful, the atmosphere. Like this sports hall full of people cheering. They know about the sport. I mean, it's a totally different atmosphere than playing somewhere else where the sports hall is empty. It's like families, there's random people just coming in and cheering for their country.
Well, that's what the case was in the UK, obviously, before the Paralympics. That's what the GB national team was used to, obviously. I'll say probably on average, maybe at best, maybe 30 people, and then obviously in London it was 9,000 people. So it was kind of even for me, as one of the only guys who'd done a Paralympics before. Obviously, the guys asked me, well, what's the Paralympics like? Obviously, I can have what my idea of my recollection of it was for me, but obviously that's not gonna come across for you in the same way. Obviously, for that games and then every game is not the same. So obviously, before the first game, for me, obviously, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, we'd known that ticket prices were sold out, so you're thinking, okay, is that going to be our venue as well? And obviously, you come out, okay, I wasn't expecting this many people, but once you relax and got into the swing of it, obviously, if I'm honest, we've played Russia, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times. Obviously, that's probably the worst I've ever seen them play against us. But then probably it was having that partisan crowd.
It makes a lot of.
It makes a massive difference. So obviously,
it does. But you know what GB has done great? They advertise Paralympic sports before the Paralympic Games. They're really good marketing. They did really good marketing on the Paralympic sports. That's why the venues were sold out, and I find it amazing. I find that great. That's the thing that Brazil didn't do. They didn't advertise the Paralympic sports enough, and their venues were not full, as it was the case in GB.
Oh yeah, but with that relation to that, it's probably because it was for us how they marketed it. It was obviously Paralympic sport coming home, so it's kind of a win-win situation, and obviously it was building on the success of the Olympic team, and obviously how well they did. Obviously, people were like, okay, we want some more of this. Obviously, had that 2-week gap in between. Okay, let's get behind the British team, and obviously, how would I say this without being quite unpolitical to the Olympic team? Obviously, they've got their medal target. Obviously, within the Paralympic sports, well, we know we're going to beat that. That whatever the Olympic team get as a total, I kind of used it not in an arrogant way. I said to somebody, obviously with Rio in mind, I think the Olympic team got like 50 odd total medals. I said, well, okay, the Paralympic team will beat that within 4 days.
Yeah.
And obviously they did. So it's kind of, we've got a stronger Paralympic team than Olympics, and it's probably the case for a lot of countries.
That's true. And also the thing that I said before is the competition on some of the sports is not on the best level. So it's easier to get medals. But your problem and was that you were founded. GB national team in city volleyball was founded when they realized that there's going to be the Olympics in London and the Paralympics in London. So you don't have the tradition of playing. So you were. That's a big problem because sports shouldn't be the Paralympic sports shouldn't be founded just because somebody is going to be the host of the Paralympics.
It's probably a short-sightedness from somebody, probably, with regard to that. But then, as you probably didn't touch upon, obviously, volleyball in this country is not a very big sport anyway.
Yeah, no, it's different. It's different for every country. It's different. And you see how Brazil did it. Volleyball is a big sport in Brazil, and they're a volleyball and football nation. And so, I mean, they did a massive improvement when they found out that they're going to have Rio games. They said, okay, we're going to have a really good Paralympic volleyball team. And you see what they did. They won silver on the World Championship before the Rio. And that's very difficult to do. I mean, I don't know if people do understand how difficult that is to do. To win silver, and Iran was bronze.
Well, it's easy. It's hard. Well, to put it in perspective, it's hard enough to just break into, say, the top 5.
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of like small clubs. Obviously, you've got before that World Championships. Obviously, Bosnia and Iran in that little club at the top.
Yeah. They were always the finals.
And then generally, what was it? Egypt, Russia. And
Germany.
And obviously in that bracket, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
up to that.
Everybody else fights for scraps from the 5th place downwards. But it's an amazing achievement what they did, and I'm really sorry to see that the GB team didn't, continue on this on the same way of development as they were before the games.
Well, I think I've seen something not long after this games to promote to get it back off the ground. I don't know if it's solely for the women's program or both, but there is media stuff about it. But then it's, in my opinion, probably, if others are honest, it's probably 4 years too late because they've lost, obviously, that momentum from the London games.
Exactly.
And then obviously you're already 4 years behind all the other countries to start with, and then you're kind of, unless you can persuade most of the players that were leading into London to come back or stay in the sport, you're starting from scratch again, and obviously the money is not there what it was for London, so you're kind of starting off on a difficult foot to start with.
That was my next point, is funding the federations, the way that you fund the sports. It's totally different. I mean, we have some private donors, but not that much private donations. Mostly we get funded by the Croatian Paralympic Committee, which gets their money through the government. So we get funded by tax money.
So when you mean our federation funding, do you mean as in lottery funding? Do you mean that?
Yeah.
That?
Yeah.
That has only come about because of how poorly the Olympic team did in Atlanta. So it's only, if they'd had probably an okay games, would that exist today? Who knows?
Yeah.
But then obviously we've built upon probably a terrible games. Obviously, only winning, I think, one gold medal. Obviously, you put into subsequent games how we've won in the Olympics. Obviously, one gold medal now would be an absolute catastrophe. It would be probably loads of people lose money, lose their jobs, and then obviously it's invested in the athletes. Obviously now they can go full time. the sports science teams behind it. So obviously psychologists, physiologists, all that. What goes
It's a
into
lot of
sports.
it's a lot of people working around it, but you have to understand that everything starting from the club level. Over here, we're not paid to play. We don't get any money to play. We do it for fun. We do it for the hope that we're going to win a medal on the European Championship or World Championship, that we're going to improve. And when we do that, then we get funding. Like athletes, we get funding. And our sports gets more funding. So it's basically our goodwill and our desire to improve that keeps us going at a club level. And fortunately, we have a good club that, that gets. We make projects so we can get funding from the city or from the government. So it's just, we need funding to go on tournaments. And if you go on tournaments, you have to make the sacrifice to come to every training session to do the most you can so you can make a better result. And in the end, so you can prepare yourself better for the Europeans or the World Championship. And that's it. So it starts on the club level. And if it starts on the club level, it also starts at every person. You have to decide for yourself what you're going to do and how you're going to progress and what are you going to give to the team and to the sports generally.
Well, that's an interesting one you bring up with club level. Obviously, probably that's where investment should be probably more heavily invested as opposed to the top level, because obviously if you've got a greater how would I put it? If you've got a greater depth of talent at the bottom, obviously as you progress higher up that pyramid, you'll have more athletes to choose from as they progress up. So it's more, it's something obviously we do. I won't say we do a fairly good job, obviously, with funding within grassroots sports. Obviously, it's at the top level. It's heavily centralised funding, obviously, with UK sport. But then, obviously, at grassroots, each home nation focuses on their own little niche. Obviously, Wales look after itself, England will look after itself, Scotland, and not forgetting Northern Ireland as well. So obviously, they all look after their grassroots. Obviously, some sports will get more money than others, but that's generally the case with even at the top level, it's based on results. You bring in results, you get more money. Okay.
Yeah, that's the way it works. It's everywhere.
Well, it's something. It's something. It's a system I agree with. Obviously, that's how life works. You
can't be rewarded for something you're not good at. It makes no sense. So you have to try to work hard to be better, and then you can get the reward if you make a result. Some people are expecting to get rewarded just because they're here. People are unrealistic.
Yeah, but that's, if we look at that one, obviously, with people want something for nothing. That's probably what's wrong with society now. It's going that way. Oh, I don't need to do that. Somebody else will do it for me. Whereas in the old days, obviously your family, your friends, they looked after each other. Whereas now it's going kind of the total opposite way. Now, why should my family look after me? That's what the government's for.
But that's also one of the aspects of being disabled. I mean, you really shouldn't expect anybody else to look after you, financially or any other way. You're no different. I mean, some things are a bit difficult for you, more difficult than for other people. But still, why should it change? Why should I get something because I'm disabled? Why should I get funding because I'm disabled? I mean, this is sports. Sports is different. Sports is you get funding for results, and disabled people don't realize it, and that's one of the biggest problems in disabled sports, is that disabled people are not actually sports people. They don't have the mindset, what we were talking about earlier. So there's it's a lot. It has a lot to do with psychology and changing the way people think about themselves and about others and their role in this sport. Like, you should be grateful for me coming over and wanting to play. I'm grateful for you giving me the opportunity to play and to get better and to go and travel around. You travel around the world and meet new people and get new experiences. I'm grateful for that. You shouldn't be grateful that I'm playing. I mean, you should be happy because I'm a good player, but not grateful.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'd agree with. Obviously, something I was reading not long after London with a disability organisation in the UK, obviously saying that the Paralympics was, how would I say this? It portrayed disabled people in unachievable ways, obviously by them going above and beyond their disability. It's okay. Yeah, I can agree to that to some degree. Okay,
Yeah.
That's your opinion. Yeah, I can accept that. But okay, for a normal person, okay, that's maybe not achievable. But in another light, why are you knocking somebody for going above and beyond and pushing themselves to not overcome their disability, but making the best of what disability they've got and doing sport? And then obviously on the flip side of that, obviously a lot of the media obviously look at the background story of a disabled athlete.
Yeah.
Also, they got injured in a war, had a road accident, blah blah blah. Instead of looking at obviously why they're say for example it's the Paralympics, they're at the Paralympics.
Yeah.
You probably something you'd attest to, and myself included. I don't care what the other person's story is to how they got to that point. And
Exactly.
that would be the same with that person. You want to beat that person, and that is it. You don't care how they got from A to B. And generally, I think that's what's wrong about, obviously, the media. They focus probably too much now on their journey to getting there, as opposed to, at the end of the day, they're there because of the sport.
You can always in that period when the Paralympics were about to start in London, you could see in the media like interviews with disabled people. I mean, the disabled sports people, and the emphasis was on their personal story, as you said, which is okay, but it has nothing to do with the Paralympics. The Paralympics are just about results in sports, and everybody is equal there. I mean, you can be a great person, but if you suck, you suck. It's a hard way. I mean, maybe it's a bad thing to say that, but that's my opinion. I like it when somebody's a good person and they're a good sports person, but
yeah, but what it comes down to at the end of the day, obviously, okay, maybe the Paralympic roots are obviously on getting more people into sport, but that's when it was obviously based on rehabilitation, whereas now it wants to see itself as equal to the Olympics. So at the end of the day, it's about sport in general is about winning.
Yeah. I mean, sports is sports. It's just about winning and having the best results. And I think it's one of the things that I find ridiculous is letting Pistorius run with able-bodied people. I mean, what did you want to prove? You can run? No, you can't. You lost. It's impossible. It's different. It's like I don't know. I'm never going to be able to throw the discus as far as the world champion in normal discus is going to be thrown. You know, it's silly. I mean, we all have our categories. I don't think that was a good move when they let him run with able bodies.
When you say that, do you believe that he doesn't know or he's not accepting of where he's at?
You should accept your limitations. I mean, you can say I have no limits, but you do. Every person has their limits. I mean, you will never be able to run that fast because you don't have your own joints. You have two prosthetic legs. It's much more different. It's uncomparable. It's great if you compare.
Can you go back about 5 seconds because it just broke up there?
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't even compare. I think you should never compare able-bodied sports to disabled sports or the sports people. You know, with the results. I don't know. Maybe I got a bit off topic. Sorry.
No, it's a valid point, but obviously, it's probably something you'd probably agree with, that you'd like to be, especially probably more so public perception and the media is being seen on equal headings with somebody that's able-bodied, be it financially and marketing and things like that. Obviously, they definitely have a one-up on disabled people straight away.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a problem, but certainly I am not that good because being to Paralympic sports, I don't like Paralympic sports that much. I don't find them interesting. So it's difficult.
That's your opinion. I can accept that.
Yeah, I don't find very competitive. Except some sports I know about. I've tried, but it's boring for me to watch it. It's never going to be the same as watching full-body sports.
Well, yeah, that's probably true, isn't it? Because obviously,
I don't even think about the things that being equal with able-bodied sports. It's never going to happen. So I'm trying to think about it. It's just think about your own progress and your own. And I don't care if somebody doesn't write about me if I win 8 gold medals. If somebody doesn't write, so who cares? I mean, it's my success. It's my achievement. And people really, I think they look too much about other people, what they think of them, and you shouldn't judge yourself or your sports on the way other people think about it. If it was like that, I would never play any Paralympic sports because people don't care about it. Most of the people.
That's probably a true reflection on that. Obviously, some sports have a little bit more popularity as opposed to others.
Definitely.
Obviously, that's the way it's going to go. And then, obviously, what's your thought? Obviously, on it always come up. It seems to come up every 4 years about the Paralympics merging with the Olympics in the future. What would your thoughts be on if that actually ever happened?
Definitely not.
Why is that reason?
I don't know why. It's a totally different sporting event. Why mix it? I would be annoyed if I would go to the Olympics and the Paralympics were in between some of the, I don't know, basketball matches I would like to watch. I wouldn't go and watch it because, you go for one thing. If you want to go to the Paralympics, go to the Paralympics. If you want to go to the Olympics, go and watch the Olympics. But I mean, it's not just that. I mean, there's a political and financial issue about that. That's different thing. I'm not really into that, so I can't.
Well, it's one of those. It's one of those things. It's kind of like another topic, isn't it? It's so many other factors that will come into it. Obviously, if they did merge, obviously, what would you get rid of out of the Paralympics to be able to fit it into the program?
And that's the ridiculous thing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't get rid of one sport just to fit in with the able-bodied. I mean, it's not good. You should be evolving your sport, not cutting it down just because you want to be at the same events as the Olympics.
Well, I
think it's bad for the sport.
It's probably the same case, but obviously with the Paralympic movement expanding, obviously getting more and more sports into it.
Yeah.
Obviously, something's got to give within another sport, which I think is probably wrong. Obviously, maybe if you want more sports to come in, it's probably something people don't know listening and watching. Obviously, the village is obviously so big, but it's got enough capacity for the Olympic athletes. Obviously, the Paralympic Games doesn't have as many athletes, obviously, so the accommodation is still there. Instead of obviously trying to condense it all into 2 weeks, I don't know why they don't. Obviously, if they're going to bring in new sports in, keep the quota they already have of the athletes within the. It's generally the more popular ones: athletics, swimming, that lose an event or two. Obviously, why not leave it in there and obviously expand the event from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, because the accommodation is not going to change. It's there already, so that
if it's possible, why not?
Obviously, there might be underlying financial constraints that's why that's not possible. But
it's a much bigger question. It involves so much more things. Everything has its pros and cons, And James, I will have to say goodbye now because I have a training session. I'm sorry.
All right, no worries.
Yeah, we can continue some other time. Okay. It's not a problem if it's necessary. And once again, sorry for my English, and thank you for having me.
No worries. Thanks for coming on. And before I forget, I would really appreciate it if you would be so kind as to leave a short written review, as it helps to get the podcast more notoriety, and it would be more visible in future to others, and thus helping more people, which my guests and I are all about. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game podcast.